Reactions speak louder than words, not actions. When my kids were little, Tayden, my son, who's older, was maybe 4 or 5. My daughter's 3 to 4 in that range. We decided to take him to a Cincinnati Reds game. Now, I know all of you in here with little kids are like, sorry, stupid move. What are you thinking? Right? But we go, and if you've ever taken little kids to a game, you know they're good for about half of an inning. And then after that, you spend 6 innings or 8 innings or 9 innings just dealing with, can we get this? Can we go here? Can we? But anyways, we're sitting there, and in front of us in a row is a couple of, I would say, college kids / young adult, young, good-looking people. They're having a good time, and they have had a few too many. They started drinking, I think, the night before. They may have started drinking a month before, but they are feeling it, right? And this girl seemed like a sweet kid. She's talking, but she's telling her friend, and she's like really like big motions. And about that time, she has a cup, full of, I don't know, ultra light something, whatever. But she's got her beer, and she turns, and when she does, she just literally, she's talking to her like this and does this. Well, it just covers both of my kids. So they're just drenched now in beer. And her friend kind of looks at her, and she realizes what she did. She looks at her, and she's like, and she freaks out. And she's looking at Jonda, my wife and I, and she's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. I'm so sorry. So she just literally grabs the beer from her friend and says, pour it on me. All right? So she hands me this, like trying to hand me the beer. She said, just pour it on my head. And I'm like, we're good. They're kids. They don't care. Look at them. They could care less. I don't even think they knew it happened. Like, we're fine. I'm not doing that. She's like, no, please just pour it on my head. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And she's like, she just pours it on herself. And I thought, what an overreaction. And this morning, that's what I want to talk about. Anyone in here ever overreacted to anything? Okay? If your hand's not up online, give us the hands up. If your hand's not up, you're a liar. So good job. We'll talk about lying next week for the good week. But we're in the second week of this series called The Good Life, and we're in Matthew 5, and it's a thing called the Sermon on the Mount. So this is a really popular teaching that Jesus had, and he kind of talked about his kingdom and how it's different. How do we live a blessed life? How do we live happy? That's really what the word translates to. How do we live in the state of happiness? And that's what God wants for us, but it's not what we think. So this is what it says in Matthew 5, recap of last week. It says, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. And before we get going, I just want to celebrate. There's so many of you in this room that do so much, so awesome. Man, you're amazing. You really are. And so many behind the scenes. But this past week, I was kind of just thinking about the good life, and I was up in the sound booth last Sunday, and I'm looking, and there's Sam, not Scam. She's not Scam, she's Sam. Sam and Scott, and I just thought, man, they're such an amazing couple. All their kids help, volunteer so many ways, wonderful family, and we just want to celebrate them for a second. So if you want to give them a hand, and let me tell you why I'm tying this in. I used this verse last week, the humble, and I'm up there, and I thought, how many times I'm in the booth, and Scott he's always asking me about, hey, so your boy, did he sign here? He's asking, is she playing tennis? Like, he's always, like, asking me about my life, and it's like this most perfect, like, awesome guy. He's amazing, but just so humble, so friendly, and I thought, all of us maybe are chasing all this stuff that we think makes us, and then here it is right in front of me, just this awesome guy who is such a great friend, such an amazing guy. So that's kind of the concept. What does this mean? As we look at kind of this series, I want to challenge you because I have overreacted too many times, like all of you in this room. But what was tough for me in my line of work is I speak in front of people, several weeks. And I've learned in my life, I didn't say it's in 9:30. Let me tell you guys a little secret, okay? Let me tell you one of the toughest things for me. I woke up here, I've been thinking about it on the week. I think I've got a good opening joke that's just going to get you guys. It's going to split those stitches. Amen? And I get up here. One, it's hard when you say it and no one laughs, and you realize, okay, that joke was terrible. But here's the hardest thing for me. I'm going to open up with something kind of loose and fun and get everybody feeling it. And right as I'm getting ready to walk up, someone comes up and like, hey, did you hear? No. Yeah, well, we're getting divorced. Oh, well, I hate to hear that. Yeah, she left me. Cheating with my brother and my dad. And both of my parents are like in ICU. Like, well, okay, you probably should be at the hospital, not talking to me right now. Okay, whatever. And it's just like you just keep getting this heavy stuff, and people just hit you all the time. Hey, like you think you're doing great. We're not doing great. We hate each other. Like, oh. And then you got to get up here and kind of do that, right? But that's hard. But let me tell you another thing that's hard. Because I'm human like many of you. Years ago, like 16 plus years ago when we started this church, I remember my kids were little, and we were riding, like we're driving to C3 together. And my wife, who she's here, she'll tell you this, she loves peace. Her happiest time is just when the kids are happy, when people are at peace. Like, that's what she wants. She just wants peace, okay? Well, we get in the car, and the kids are little, and they're fighting, and they're going nuts, and you can tell she's getting, so I just made a suggestion of what I would do if I were her. Always works in a marriage. And turns out it didn't work. And then she kind of got just a little bit, I guess, upset with me. And it was just like this whole thing. So then I had to walk in that morning, and I think we were down in Casa at that point, in front of Casa, and like, hey, guys, it was miserable. I just couldn't get my mind right. So I made a vow. I prayed. I said, God, I can't do that. I can't do that. You got to help me somehow. What I want to celebrate with you guys before we get into the message today, do you know in 16 plus years, I have never had one argument, one fight, not even a cross word with my wife or my kids. 16 years heading to C3. Is that amazing? Yeah. We don't ride together. I've never rode with them since. I ride by myself every morning. It's the most peaceful time. I'm happy. Right? Why? Because I overreact. You guys overreact. Well, as we talk about this series, and just give you the overview, last week we talked about attitude, and I kind of put faith and attitude together. And next week, Aaron's going to talk about heart. Then we're going to come back and talk about this good life of serving and what it means to really live and show grace. And I'm telling you, I think this can be so life-altering. But here's the thing that Jesus taught us. I was on Twitter. It's been a long time ago. And I saw this. You just see stuff. Who cares? But this really hit me. This guy said, before you demand, this is when I think they're battling with the schools, and, that comes up and back forth. He said, before you demand Christianity be taught in schools, maybe you should demand it be taught in churches. Right? I'm like, oh, that's pretty actually good. And that's what I want to kind of challenge you today is, I think we all kind of know the game, know how to play the game. But I want you to, are we really actually taking to heart what Jesus is going to share with us? So this is kind of a heavy one today, okay? We're going to look at Matthew 5, starting in verse 11. Here's what Jesus said. He said, God blesses you. Okay, I like that. When people mock you. Okay, I don't like that. And persecute you. And lie about you. And say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Now keep that verse up for a second because I think you guys got to hear this. Please understand, I've learned in my life that people don't get this, especially if you're younger, but old people don't get this either. There's a difference between a challenge of my faith and a consequence of my decision. And what I've learned in the church world is people love to talk about how it's a challenge of their faith. Well, me and the wife, we're having trouble. She might leave me. Oh, well, what happened? Well, she found out I was cheating on her for 6 months. That's not really a challenge of your faith. That's a consequence of some bad decisions that you made. But what Jesus said here, look, he said, no, you didn't do anything wrong. You literally didn't do anything wrong. Then he goes on, he digs deeper. He says, be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. Now, let's pretend for a second. Let's say that Andy comes up and talks to me. He's like, hey, man, I need to talk to you. I'm struggling, got some problems. Like, yeah, okay. So he comes in Tuesday morning. We go back in this back office. We're sitting down. And he tells me, he gives me the spiel, okay? He wants some good spiritual counseling. And he says, hey, Trent, listen, I've been doing the right thing. I feel like everything's good at work. But you know what? They mocked me. They've been persecuted. They've actually been trying to, ruin me at my job. They're lying about me. They're saying all sorts of evil things. And I look at him and I say, I've got the answer. And he gets excited. He's like, okay, what is it? And I say, be happy about it. Be very glad. Right? Doesn't this sound fake? It almost sounds like bad advice. To me, it sounds like bad news. Like, Jesus, that doesn't sound good at all. But we're about to learn today, and this is so powerful, with reactions, okay? And this is, you have words, you have actions, and you have reactions. Now, here's the thing about words. Words are cheap, let's be honest. Not that they can't be used for good, but words, we can say anything. I can say, I love my wife and treat her like garbage every day. I can post online, look at me and my wife, she's the greatest woman I've ever seen in my life, and completely not care about her. It's words. Words. And here's what we learn about our faith. Words rarely prove my faith or your faith. They just don't. Words are cheap. Jesus is teaching us, though, actions we think, no, you prove things with your actions. Barely. Because what I've also learned in my life is if I want something, I can act good to get what I want. I have friends who are complete colossal jerks, and when they were dating their wives, I was like, I don't know who you are. They were like Romeos. Now, of course, they get married and they go back to being their normal jerk, right? But what are they doing? They're like, I can act right to get what I want. You see, actions can even be swayed for if it serves me. But reactions, this is what Jesus is talking about. He's like, how do you react when someone mistreats you? How do you react when someone says something that truly hurts your feelings? He's like, this is when you're going to find out what you truly put your trust in. Not words, not actions, but reactions. How am I going to react when someone says something that hurts me, disturbs me, perturbs me? Go down the line. How do I react? Reactions are louder than words. Well, a few verses later, he's given this whole teaching. He doubles back down on this. I want you to hear it in verse 38. He said, you have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury. This is Old Testament. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So in that system, if someone insulted me or hurt me, I was supposed to pay them back. If someone did something good to me, I owe them back equal. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Tooth for a tooth. He says, but I say, I'm about to change it. Do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, whoa, hold on. Someone slaps me? Now, there's a key verse here I want you to hear, okay? Some people like to make Christianity all about passive, like being very passive. Like, don't defend yourself. Don't ever own a gun. Don't do, okay, that's a stance people take. But here's kind of a little bit of argument I would give. Notice he says, he put it specifically, your right cheek. Well, why did Jesus say your right cheek? In Bible times, much like America right now, most people, majority, are right-handed. So if I'm walking up to say Scott and I'm going to slap him on his right cheek, well, his right cheek means I'm backhanding him. This isn't an attack. This isn't a physical assault or attack. So I don't think that's what Jesus is talking about. He's not saying, hey, people are just beating you, just sit and take it. He's not saying that. I'm in a really abusive situation with a family. No, he's saying, don't do that. That's not the instructions here. But what do you do when someone, back in the old days, remember the duel? You take your glove, slap him across the face. That's the picture he's given. What do you do when someone insults you or tries to get you worked up or bait you? How do you respond? He was like, to the Jewish culture, it was like, I tell you, I respond exactly the way you did to me. I do back. And Jesus is like, no, that's not how we roll. He says, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. So if they insult me, yeah, you're not going to retaliate. But I don't like that. Then he says, if you're sued in court, if they're taking advantage of you and sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. Now, we hear that, and if you're like me, we're Americans. We're like, that is not how we roll, Jesus. Okay? We don't do that, do we? One, because it's weak. It feels weak. One, because it doesn't feel like it's helpful. And I know many of you guys are like me. You're like, that's not how the real world works. So the good life question I want to give you today, and I really want you to take this in. Here's the question you want to ask. You are going to be mistreated. You are going to be insulted. You are. That's just part of life. You're going to have people say things about you that sometimes aren't true. Just accept that right now. Now, when they do that, when they hurt your baby or they say something that was offensive, is your first response, well, I'm going to get on Facebook, I'm a keyboard warrior, and I'm going to tell everybody, I'm going to make sure people defend me. Okay. But Jesus is like, no, there might be a better way, actually. There might be a better way to handle this. I, in the last 2 weeks, had someone that I felt like I trusted, and someone was telling me something they said, and I was like, and I'll tell you this, I gave them benefit, I said, I don't believe that. I'm not saying you're a liar, I'm just saying I think you're construing what they said. I'm like, okay. A little bit later, someone else I talked to, and like, no, dude, I was there. And it was one of those, like, it was truly this, like, that's not even true. They're literally hurting my character by saying a lie. Man, it hurts. And in that moment, because of thinking this, here's the question I had to ask myself. Here's the good life question. What story do I want to tell? When this is all said and done and the emotions are not nearly as high as they used to be, what will people say about the way I reacted to a tough situation? What story do I what to tell. My daughter's in here, and I'll call her out for just a second. My daughter, I'll explain both of my kids real quick. My son, they're both freshmen in college. My son is wired more like, I think, my wife and the Smiths. They're very, I think they're more loving, more forgiving. My daughter, sadly, is wired like the Carpenters. We are not loving, not as forgiving, right? We're a little bit more like, you guys say, I like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. No. My daughter would take it further. She's like, I want your hand for a fingernail, right? Like if it's one, and my older brother, he called it the Carpenter rule. He was like, if someone hits you, you hit them back 7 times, and 7 times harder, right? Well, my daughter, she kind of has more of that mentality. Like, I get it. That's why I kind of respect her. We're same world. Well, my daughter, because of that, and she's here, and she can deny it, but it's so true. All through school, she had enemies. Like every school we played, if a girl scored 20, she hates her. So it's kind of a running joke. We'd get in the car and be like, Tegan, my wife and I do intentionally bring up a girl's name they just played from like Rock Hill. Oh, you know how I feel about her. Like she just would lose her mind. So she has a lot of enemies, okay? She has enemies all over the county that she's played sports with. But she's had a few kind of bigger enemies. And I remember one time something happened to this girl, and it was kind of sad. And I remember we're just all kind of talking, and my daughter said, oh, yeah, I messaged her. Oh, boy. Right? Like you're thinking, did you message her like, I'm glad it happened to you because I hate you, I want to fight? And she said, no, I was just or I messaged her or saw her or whatever. And she's like, no, I just basically said, I'm sorry. I feel bad for you. Now, all of you in this room are like, who cares? That's not even a big deal, right? That's because you don't know our daughter. That actually is, no, I'm joking. But we get back in bed that night, and I remember, it was profound to me. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I thought for sure her reaction would be one way. But it wasn't. She actually reacted in an amazing way. And I kind of was taken back. Because I thought that day she told a better story. You see, every day we're writing a new page of our life. Every day we're making choices and reacting. And every day that's a new page of the story that you're going to tell one day. So how are you going to react when things don't go your way? How do we do that? How do we decide? There's a popular trend on social media that started a few years back, and it's basically called, how's it going? How it started versus how it's going. And I found this one, I think it was on Twitter or something, but this is a lady talking about, she's a nurse. And she said, you want to know how my day started versus how it's going as I'm getting ready to leave my 10-hour shift? This is how I started, right? You school teachers, right? Most people in any job can get this, right? That's how it started versus how it's going as I'm getting ready to leave. Well, this morning as we to give you a concept of this, because I was thinking about this message, and I was like, I know people are like, yeah, that sounds good. It's not real world stuff. No one can do it. But yeah, we get it. We should do it. We'll try. We're not going to. Well, just to make it real, I want to talk about 2 guys who walked with Jesus for 3 years. Inner circle guys. Like when he called special events, he would call 3 guys over, they were his inner guys. They heard stuff, saw stuff no one else even saw. They were close with him. Okay? One's name was John, one's name was Peter. They're part of the original 12 disciples that Jesus called. Just like you this morning, they heard this speech over and over. This is how we react. This is how we do. And they're like, yeah, we get it, but we don't do that. Now, just to prove it, I want to tell you how they started, okay? So this is John, this is Peter, just to give you backgrounds on how they started. Walk with Jesus for 3 years. So who's John? Give you a little background. John was called one of the sons of thunder with his brother. Now, I grew up with brothers, and I know this. If you're called the sons of thunders, you're tearing up some stuff, right? I mean, you know how to destroy things. So they were wide open. One day, after Jesus gave this sermon, they're walking through, and Jesus is like, look, guys, I'm getting ready to die. It's going to be bad. But before I do that, I want to share a Passover meal with you guys. So they passed through the Samaritan town, and he's like, let's see if we can have someone who will show hospitality to us. No one will, because the Samaritans hated the Jews. So they're going around, hey, any chance we could stay here? No. Any chance we could stay here? Basically, the whole village is like, we don't want you here. Leave. So you know what John does? John's walking right beside Jesus. And here's what he says, literally. He whispers in his ear, do you want me to call down fire from heaven and destroy everyone in this place? Jesus is like, no, John, that's not how we roll. But that was it. That was his first response. How about, God, let's call down fire from heaven and destroy this whole room because I hate all of you. That's how it started. Peter was as hot-headed as you could get. Matter of fact, when they actually capture Jesus and they take him and the guards are taking him away, the Bible tells us that Peter grabs a sword, and I think he was a fisherman, not a fighter. He's trying to, I think, cut the guy's head off, but he misses and cuts off his ear. He literally he loses his mind. A little bit later, they're taking Jesus and they're beating him, and he's away, and he told Jesus, look, Jesus, I'll never deny you. I'll never leave you. And he's sitting by a fire, warming his hands, and a little teenage girl comes up and says, hey, you're with Jesus. You're one of his followers, aren't you? The Bible says he literally started cursing, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never met the man a day in my life. Okay? So these guys heard this same message I'm telling you today, and they walked away, and you know what they did? Someone hurts me, I'm going to hurt them back just as bad. Someone wrongs me, I'm going to wrong them. Someone insults me, you better believe I'm insulting them. They're just like us. They saw it, right? But then something happened. They both were the kings of overreacting, like many of us. But something happened. What happened? They watched their leader that they thought was going to take over the Roman government. They watched him actually get taken over by religious leaders, and they watched him get tortured. They watched people mock him, and they watched him not respond. Now, I get it. You guys are like, yeah, he's Jesus, we're not. True. But they saw something, and I think you can find it. The key thing in John 19, and I think this is the final of this whole thing, okay? So if you didn't pay attention, come back with me just if you're online, come back, click back, put volume back up for just 1 second. Pilate, they beat him. The Bible says so much he's unrecognizable, bloody pulp. They're mocking him. They're spitting on him. And Pilate is the one in charge of deciding whether he gets crucified or freed. This is what Pilate says in verse 10. He says, why don't you talk to me, Pilate demanded. Don't you realize that I have the power? I have the power to release you or crucify you. Now, guys, this is where the good news comes in. If you haven't got it yet, this is why it's such good news. Jesus, what he's saying is, don't you realize I have the power to affect your life any way I want? Jesus looks back at him in the next verse and notice what he says. And Jesus said, you would have no power over me at all unless it were given to you from above. Now, why is this good news? Because Jesus is helping us understand right now, people have no power over you. Listen, I watch moms do this all the time. Well, I was having a good day, and then little Jimmy came in and lost his mind, and now I've lost my mind. So little Jimmy controls all your actions? I make a joke with my wife sometimes. She's like, well, I was happy, and now the kids are fighting, and now I don't feel good. I'm like, so the kids control your happiness? The other day I said that. I was like, so our kids control whether you're happy or not? And she went, yes, 100%, right? Like, what else do you think? But this is what Jesus is saying. He's like, we live in a world where we think if they insult me, then they're going to ruin my day. If someone doesn't like me, then I get consumed by it. And Jesus is like, they have no power over you. They don't. He says, you have no power over me. You can't control my reactions. I realize it's ultimately all controlled by God. The good news is no person, kid, wife, husband, work, fellow workmate, someone at your school has power to control your reactions. He says, no, you do. That's the good news. Our reactions reflect our confidence or lack of confidence in God. Think about that for a second. My reactions every single day basically show whether I have confidence or I don't in God. When I don't have confidence in God or I want to do things my own way, then I say, I'm taking matters into my own hands. But like Jesus, when Pilate's like literally mocking him, he's like, you understand who I am? Maybe they beat you senseless. Maybe you're out of it. Listen to me, Jesus. I have the power to end your life today. Now speak to me. Now Jesus responds, you have no power over me. See, that's good news. That person that you claim just keeps ruining your day, ruining your week, Jesus is like, that's not true. They have no power over you, especially your reactions. Those guys were overreactors. So we talked about, how it started. Let's look at how it's going. After the resurrection, notice what these two guys, they completely changed their tune. This is what John wrote. John wrote, took me a while, guys, but here's the key verse. Such a great verse in the Bible. God is love. Look what he goes on to say. He says, since God loves us that much, we surely ought to love each other. But what if they hurt me? What if they insult me? And like I said, I'm not talking about physical abuse. I'm not talking about, no, stay in that relationship. It's horrible. Kids are scared. No, leave. I'm talking about, what do you do when someone hurts your feelings? What do you do when someone insults you? He says, we ought to love each other. And God has given us his Spirit as proof that we live in him. And he's like, and we're all like, but God, I can't do that. And he's like, exactly. I want to do it through you. It's not in your power, it's in mine. I want to live through you and do these things. Why? Because I'm love. Peter said this in one of his letters. He said, I watched him. Remember, I was the guy that tried to cut the ear off, but I watched Jesus and I watched them beat him like time after time. I watched him hang on the cross. And when he's hanging on the cross as he was about to die, he said, Father, and everybody's waiting for it. His followers are like, yes, give it to him, destroy him. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's what made him pen this. He said, he did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. What's Peter saying? I watched a man not react like any of us ever would because he trusted God was in control. Now, let me give you a side note to this. I'm not telling you when you live this life, everything happens your way. It doesn't. I'm not telling you everything's easy. I'm not telling you everything you pray for it, you get it. It's not a genie. But I'm telling you, you can live and react differently when you understand who you're ultimately trusting. Are you trusting yourself, or are you going to trust God? That's the good news. My son has a phrase. He talked to me once, and he was like, Dad, I want to get a tattoo. I was like, I'm not a fan. I'll tell you why I'm not a fan. One, you're going to go to hell, amen? No, you're saying, I'm not a fan because I'm like, I know too many of my knucklehead friends who have like, Rachel X'd out, Lisa X'd out, and then it's like, Sally with a big heart. Like, dude, we all get what was happening. I get other people, like it's going to be cute on my backside because I'm 18 and I'm built well. Be 38, right? That well gets really big. It's like, so I'm like, I don't want, but he's like, no. And I thought, and here's my rule. I said, if you're going to tattoo, here's my rule. It's got to really be something that matters. And he's like, okay, he's going back and forth. And he said this phrase. Well, what he did was, and a wristband we both have, he wears all the time. And I think Emmett gave it to him, but it's God's got this. And I was okay with that because I realized that's been kind of the story of his life. Even growing up as a kid, I think not being able to hear, he's always kind of been into sports. As he got to about 9, 10, 11, he loved sports, but football kind of became the one he really loved. And you get excited, and it was almost like a fairy tale. He gets to be his freshman year, and he gets injured, but we're like, hey, it's okay. Broke his collarbone. He really wasn't going to start. It's okay. Gets back at the end, gets to play in a playoff game. We're excited. Then he got lucky enough as a sophomore to start for the varsity. We were ecstatic. It was amazing. Went all the way to the state championship, got beat by Satan's team, and we're like, man, and I remember thinking, man, this is all working out right. It's working good. God's got this. Yeah, you've had struggles, but God's got this. Come into his junior year, literally season-ending injury, plagued with injuries. Then we started getting some calls. Some schools were interested. We'd go visit. Then they weren't. And I just kept watching this, and I kept watching his kind of response to this. And ended up coming back here. Long story short, gets offered a school. He's so excited, can't wait to go play. 2 days before he's supposed to leave, the school, whole school, not football team, shuts down. And I'm sitting in my kitchen with him and our family on a Monday night, and we're trying to figure out what your next plan is. And before his mom or his sister got home, I'm talking to him. I'm like, yeah, it's tough. And he said this. He said, yeah, but it happens. And I looked him in the eye and said, it doesn't happen. School, I've never heard of a school shutting down. You shut down a school, bro. And he said, he just kind of looked at me. He's like, God's got this. God's got this. Now here's the point. That, like my daughter, when I talked her story, both of them resonated with me. Why? Because I watched two people say, I'm going to trust. I'm not going to trust in myself. I'm going to trust in him. God is love. So that's how I'm going to treat other people. God is love, so he's in control. Dang, don't you realize these coaches can make you or destroy? No, they can't. They're not in control. They have no power over me. God does. That's the one that I want to trust. So here's the question I want to ask you. What would it look like? Getting ready to pray. Promise we're praying. But really feel this. what would it look like, sound like, to respond like God is in control? Now, here's your homework assignment this week, okay? All of us in this room have someone that can push our buttons so well. Don't elbow them. It might be your spouse. It might be a kid. It might be some of you young people. It might be a parent. My mom, when I walk in, I'm just ready. Here's what I challenge you to do. What would it look like just this week to make a decision before it happens, because you know it's going to happen? What if instead of overreacting, I underreact? What instead of going eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, what if instead of elevating it and going 10, I lower it and show grace? What if I actually take it in and say, it's okay, because your words don't have power over me? That's good news. God is in control. I'm not. This, because you guys weren't here at the 9:30, this morning a boy by the name of Stryker got baptized. And I'm going to read this, okay? Talked to him. I love Stryker. I think he's got a cool name. Cool kid. But here's what he said right before he got baptized. And I want you to hear this because life isn't going to happen exactly the way that you want. How are you going to react? This is a 5th, 6th grade kid. I want to be baptized so I can keep getting closer to God and be able to see my sister again in heaven. I want to walk with her again one day in paradise. And I want to follow Christ. Now, here's what I would say. In a terrible situation, who do you trust? Who has power? You see, I can't speak into that because I haven't experienced that. Some of you in this room have had so much trauma, and you're like, Trent, shut up. You have no clue. I don't. That was the same as Peter and John, but they're like, we don't either. But we watched him. It was as bad as it could get, guys. And he looked a guy in the eyes and said, no, you're not in control of this. He is. That's why I react differently. That's the good life. That's the life we're called that Jesus wants to live in us. So this morning, if you would, let's just pray for just a moment. If you would, just close your eyes. I'm so glad you guys are here. So thankful for those watching online. And let me just say this. Before we start to pray, no one looking around, just close your eyes for a second. Anyone like to pray for your overreactions? Quick hand. Just pray for me. Thank you. Thank you. Some of those hands went up really quick. Praying for you guys. God, I do pray. I pray for those of us who struggle. May we run a little hot. And I pray today that you help us think through not my words, not even my actions, but my reactions truly prove who I'm trusting in any given moment. God, I pray you help us with our reactions, because reactions speak louder than words. Pray today for those who raise their hand and say, I struggle, I fly off the handle, I say things, do things I shouldn't. God, help me to realize I'm not in control, and I don't have to be, because you are. I can't control other people. God, I can't even control myself. But you're in control. And I get to trust that. I get to trust that every single day. And that's what brings not only peace and happiness, but helps me to live the good life. So Jesus, thank you that even in your darkest, lowest moments, you reacted 100% like you're confident in God the Father. Help us to do the same. God, I pray for someone here, someone watching online, maybe don't know you, maybe want that so bad, want that kind of life, but don't know how to get it, and today you offer it freely by them simply putting their faith and trust in you. It can be something as simple as a prayer like this to say, Jesus, I know I've made a mess of things. I know I've messed up. I know I've sinned, but I'm asking you this morning to save me. Forgive me. Jesus, my life is yours. Now work in me. Thank you for saving me. God, we thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for all that you're about to do. We can't wait. And I just pray today that we would be known as we walk out these doors this week, not for our overreactions, but for our underreactions. Because we know You're in charge and in control. We thank you, and we ask these things in your name, and amen. Hey, guys, real quick, before you leave, if you're interested, we do have the prayer wall. And if you sign up, that's going to start tomorrow. But there's a lot of prayers on there. If you'd like to take one, we want to be praying for that. If you have something you need to pray about, put it up there. You can make it anonymous. But we want to be praying for those prayer requests every single day for the 24 days. Have a great week. We'll see you next week for week 3.